Will you join me in a word of prayer? O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Our Old Testament lesson for today from Genesis chapter 18, verse 1 said that the Lord appeared to Abram by the oaks of Mamre as he sat by the door of his tent in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing before him. And when he saw them, he ran from the door of his tent. And he fell down and bowed to the earth before them. And he said, Lord, if I found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant, but let a little water be brought, wash your feet, and rest yourself under this tree, while I bring a morsel of bread so that you may be refreshed, and then you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. And they said to him, do as you have said. So Abraham ran quickly to the tent. And to Sarah he said, quick! Need some flour, 3 seahs of flour. Knead it, make cakes. And he ran out to the herd, and he took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man who quickly prepared it for them. 3 times in that short little episode in Genesis 18, we're told how quickly Abraham prepared all this and how quickly he told Sarah, his wife, and his servant to do this for him. Quickly. Let's be honest. How quick could it have been? In that day, you not only had to take the flour and mix it with the water and the oil and knead it in order to make bread, but you also had to stoke the fire for the coals. There were no electric ovens. There were no gas-fired stoves. You had to create the coals to warm up the oven or the baking stone or whatever you're cooking that bread on. Abraham went out to the field to get a calf. You can't just open up the refrigerator and get some meat that's already pre-prepared or take out a steak and put it on the grill. He went out and got a calf from the herd. It still needed to be slaughtered and dressed and butchered before you can even start to cook it. It's a lot of work, but it was worth it. It was worth it for these guests, because we'll find out a little bit later in this episode that 2 of those guests are angels, and one of them is the Lord himself. The Lord himself had come to visit Abraham. Nearly 2,000 years later, the Lord came to visit in a village called Bethany and came to the house of 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. And not much had changed in that 2,000 years. They still didn't have refrigeration. They still didn't have gas-fired ovens or stoves. They still didn't have electricity. If you were going to bake bread, you still had to knead it yourself. You still had to produce it over fired coals. Not much had changed, and so there is a lot of work to do. Preparing for a guest took a lot of work. There wasn't a lot of time for leisure when a guest came, until the guest is cared for, until the guest has already been fed. And I'm sure that Martha, in the gospel lesson, Luke chapter 10, had planned to sit down and visit with Jesus after his basic needs were taken care of. Because he's an honored guest. You're not just going to ignore that basic hospitality like her sister was doing. So her comment to Jesus seems fair, doesn't it? Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Jesus replied to Martha, Luke chapter 10, verses 41 to 42, Martha, Martha, you are anxious about and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, and it will not be taken away from her. Luke chapter 10, 41 to 42, that's the text for this message today. This past month, our family had a lot of guests in town because we had a lot of family come in from the Midwest and visit with us. And before they came in, we went to Costco. We bought all kinds of food, a lot of food that's already prepared, things we could just pop into the microwave or we could warm them up in the oven, things we didn't even have to warm up, that we could just pull out of the refrigerator and eat. We spent hardly any time preparing and serving food, not compared to what they would have had to do 2,000 years ago in the time of Mary and Martha, or 4,000 years ago in the time of Abraham and Sarah. We hardly had to do any preparing of that food. And just think about the modern conveniences that we have in our day and age today when it comes to food. Not only can you run to Costco to get food, but you could run to Albertsons, you could run to Winco, you could run anywhere close by to get food. Or maybe you don't want to go out to get food at all. Well, then you could just order food through HelloFresh or Blue Apron. These are those companies that send you a box with all the ingredients already prepared in the right proportions with a recipe. So all you have to do is cook it, or maybe you just don't like to cook. So instead of having that delivered, you'll just have Uber Eats bring all the food for you and all your guests, and you don't have to do any preparations. We have more leisure time in our day and age than any other people in all of human history. That is to say, for all generations that have ever lived before us, we have to spend less time taking care of our basic needs of food and housing than any other people that have ever lived. And yet, are we any less busy? Well, it is one of the reasons that technology is advancing so fast in our day and age, because we don't have to spend all that time taking care of our basic needs of food and housing. People have time to be innovative, time to be creative, and so technology is advancing at a pace that it never has in the past in human history, because we have all these conveniences, and yet it also makes us more busy, and it doesn't make life easier. We just fill life with more work. I think I told you earlier in the summer that in a previous sermon that I've been reading a book by Hannah Arendt called The Human Condition. And she's not a Christian. She's Jewish ethnically, but she's secular and academic and non-religious really in her life. And she's got some significant insights though in that book. It's not one that I suggest you read. It's just some of the insights that she makes about our human condition are really telling. For example, one of the things she notes is that part of the malaise, maybe a significant part of the malaise and discontent that we people experience in our modern world has to do with the fact that we don't have to spend time laboring for our basic necessities anymore like people used to do. But she said it doesn't prevent us from laboring. She suggests we're still laboring, just instead of laboring at all those basic necessities, we've started laboring at our leisure. And we labor at our leisure expecting it to give us the level of satisfaction that we're looking for in life, and yet if we look there for it, it's all going to be for naught. Now, I think she's right. I mean, think about how much time we spend laboring at our leisure and working for it. How much time we spend planning vacations and trying to book travel and caring for our recreational equipment. So our RVs and our ATVs and our campers and our golf clubs and all of those sorts of things. Think about how much time you spend planning and preparing for people to come over for entertaining and at your own house, or for going someplace else for entertaining with other people. Think about how much time you spend just trying to figure out what to watch on the streaming services that are out there. Our leisure time has become laborious. We work at relaxing. And whether it's the labor of serving that Martha was doing when Jesus came over, or it's our labor of leisure, Jesus' point about it is the same. There's something more primary, something that takes priority, over all that laboring. Taking time to sit at Jesus' feet and listen to him. Taking time to sit at the feet of Jesus and listen to him. Something that we often don't do until Jesus comes calling. In the Old Testament lesson with Abraham, the Lord came to him at the Oaks of Mamre. The Lord came calling. In the New Testament lesson at Mary and Martha's home, the Lord came calling, came into Mary and Martha's home. And sometimes for us, we don't stop our busyness and our laboring until the Lord comes calling. And that happens either through a catastrophic event like an illness or loss of a job, maybe even loss of a loved one. Until we finally stop and pay attention to him. But you know, the good news of the New Testament, the good news that came to us in Jesus is that we don't have to wait for the Lord to come anymore before we stop and pay attention to him. Because the Lord has already come. John 14, verse 23, Jesus said, "If anyone loves me and keeps my word," that is, holds dear to my word, "my Father will love that person, and we will come and make our home with that person." John 14, 23. We will come and make our home with that person. Now think about that for a minute. Come and make our home. It's not that Jesus is coming to my home, and so I need to serve him. Jesus comes and makes his home here. He and the Father make this their home. So I become a guest in my own life because now they're here and it's their home, and the Father and the Son through the Spirit serve me. See, the big difference between Abraham's visit from the Lord and Mary and Martha's visit from the Lord is that in Genesis chapter 18, the Lord came in appearance as a man. But in Luke chapter 10, the Lord came in the person of Jesus. In Genesis 18, he appeared to be a person. In Luke chapter 10, he had already made our flesh his home. John chapter 1, verse 14 said that he took on flesh and made his dwelling among us. And he did so that he could serve our needs, and not just our day-to-day basic necessity needs, but our today-to-eternity needs. And so he invites us just to sit at his feet and be served by him, to be the guest in our own house, so to speak, and be served with his word of forgiveness, be served with his word of promise, be served with his word of assurance, his word that encourages, his word that exhorts, his word that guides us so that our labors, whether it's laboring in our serving or it's laboring in our leisure, whatever they are, have meaning and purpose again because he fills them with meaning. That's why Jesus said to Martha, "Martha, Martha, you're anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, and it will not be taken away from her." Oh, how often we are the ones who take away that good portion from ourselves. This sermon right now is about 4 minutes shorter than a normal sermon that I prepare. And normally I would add another illustration, something to really drive home the point and bring it home to you, but you know what? Convicted by this text that none of that is really necessary. What is necessary? There's one thing necessary today. And I don't know if you've taken time for this yet today. And so we're going to take time to do it for the next 4 minutes for the rest of the sermon. So the sermon is not over. But for the next 4 minutes, we're going to do the one thing that Jesus has invited us to do, the one thing necessary, and take time just to be with him at his feet. You have in your service folders lots of scripture readings from today. You've got the Old Testament reading, you've got the Colossians reading, you have the gospel reading. You have 4 minutes just in quietness to spend some time with the Lord to wrap up this sermon. And I know that's going to seem a little bit awkward. We spend about 30 to 60 seconds during the confession and quiet time in here. And I know it feels like an eternity. 4 minutes is going to feel like a really long time. But don't worry, don't look at your watch. I'll be watching the time. Parents who are here, you're thinking, oh no, 4 minutes of trying to keep the kids quiet. Don't worry about the kids. That's serving and that's labor. Let the kids do what the kids do. Open up the scriptures and spend the next 4 minutes with the Lord to yourself. So it'll be quiet in here, but we'll hear kids in here. We'll hear other things. After 4 minutes, I'm going to come up and I'm going to start our prayers of the day. And then after the prayers of the day, we'll have the Apostles' Creed. Let's go before the Lord in that one thing necessary.